This is a Global Skills Podcast, conversations that shape the future of work and learning. We're exploring how we close the skills gap and build a future where everyone has the chance to thrive. From education to business, connecting people, ideas, and opportunities that drive change. It's about collaboration, curiosity, and creating real impact today. Because every skill learned brings us one step closer to a more inclusive world. The Global Skills Podcast, where learning and opportunity come together. Welcome today to the Global Skills Podcast. We're joined by Mike Byrne and Dylan Stokes from NIIT. Mike is a seasoned EdTech sales leader and VP of Sales for EMEA, known for driving enterprise growth and helping organizations unlock workforce potential. Dylan, NIIT's Global Head of HCM Technology Practice, is a former UK barrister and compliance executive who now leads major global learning technology programs. Together, they bring deep expertise across learning strategy, CM systems, and the future of AI-enabled workforce development. It's great to have you both on the show.
Thanks very much, Vanessa. Happy to be here.
I love to ask guests, and it's the first time I've had two instead of one. So if I'll start with you, Dylan, I'd love to know, how did you end up in the role that you're in terms of like leading learning and influencing organizations to, I guess, streamline and be really effective and future-proofing their businesses?
So I've been, I guess, in the HR space about 18 years in total, as you said, as a compliance executive. And then I finished off at TD Bank as a VP of learning. So I've been working in, building LMSs and looking how to create efficiencies in learning since about 1998. And working with many of the large providers throughout the world to really understand what's the best technology and how you can get the best out of that technology. And then, as I joined NIIT about 8 years ago, taking that knowledge and then applying it to multiple clients. And that's really sort of gets me up in the morning, the excitement of actually being able to assist clients to create efficiency in their learning and their platforms and really get the best out of the products they're using.
And Mike, what about you? You come more from the EdTech space. I would love to know how you've ended up where you are today.
Yeah, well, probably like many people, when I was starting my career, I hadn't really heard of EdTech or e-learning when I left university. So I sort of fell into the industry. But that was a long time ago now, probably 24 years ago, when I was a much younger man and I moved down to London, needed a job, thought sales would be a good fit for me. And I fell into a role with a company called Element K, which was one of the first off-the-shelf content providers back in the day. And I really enjoyed it. And since then, I've worked for a number of vendors, always on the sales side, commercial, as you mentioned, Vanessa, working for learning management organizations, learning services organizations, content development companies. And now I've actually ended up back at NIIT for the second time. They acquired a company I worked for around 17 years ago. Really, I've joined the organization just for the sheer depth and breadth of the services that we offer. It means every day is very new. We're involved in lots of exciting projects with a number of Fortune 500 customers. So that's how I've ended up where I am.
NIIT have just formed a partnership with Abodoo, and I know the team at Abodoo is very excited because, as you say, the length and breadth of the L&D team, both professional services, consulting, and account directors, it's really extensive. What are you seeing as the biggest trends that are happening now for NIIT in terms of service delivery or offerings, or what's the greatest demand in the marketplace around L&D?
Well, what have we got? We're about 2 minutes in and we're mentioning GenAI for the first time. So there's a lot of interest at the moment in terms of what we can do around GenAI. We were recently announced by Fosway, one of the leaders in this space, which was fantastic news. I think we're still seeing a little bit of a lag, though, with customers when it comes from actual interest to widespread adoption. But we're definitely involved in some really interesting conversations, especially around people that want to move the needle in terms of delivering really personalized and immersive learning experiences as well. And then I guess a bit more generally around the sort of the core service offerings that we're known for in the market, our managed learning service portfolio. We're seeing a lot of interest at the moment with organizations that are going through transformation and looking to see how they can drive efficiencies and maybe rationalization in terms of their core L&D offerings. So we're involved in a number of conversations across EMEA and actually globally on that basis as well at the moment.
Yeah, I was going to say, I look at AI the opposite way. I look at the impact that AI has created to the market. And if you look just in the UK, the student loans not being repaid because people coming out of university don't have jobs. Why are they not doing that? Because those entry jobs as graduates are going to AI. So if you take out the bottom of that kind of hierarchy of how people learn and get into the middle management and people moving up, how do you address that problem? And I think a key part of that is skills technology. I think how skills technology fills that gap, it can identify you the skills you don't have, the skills that you need, and can be quite predictive in that regard. And I think any company that's not looking into this space about what the situation is with skills, how they're addressing the changes that AI are creating, are really going to be in trouble. Not maybe today, but in 3 years' time. So you've got to plan now if you want to be successful in 3 years. And I think that's where, companies like NIIT can step in, supporting that kind of having the consultants and using the technology that's available, like yourself, to ensure that we can fill that gap and make sure that company is efficient into the future.
I think it's a really good point. And a question I haven't asked you before is, I think a lot of the guests that we're having on are talking about, C-suite decisions that are coming down saying, look, just make head cuts. And do you think that companies in that position should just make the cuts and then look at skills and L&D, or should they make it in advance? And the reason I ask that question is I think there's a lot of knowledge workers being cut right now for the sake of headcount. Would love to know your thoughts.
There's definitely a reduction that's happening in many companies, especially even in the technical space. You see a lot of people that are reducing the size of their company like 10%. Saying that they don't need those people because of AI and so on. I'm not saying that they haven't taken the time to do that analysis, but I think if you don't do that analysis, you're just creating a headache for yourself down the line. And I think you've got to look at that. You've got to look at what was the impact in the pandemic as well, and people that didn't return or change jobs because they don't want to go back into the office. So all of those factors need to be taken into account. I think as an industry, we've been very archaic. We've carried on looking at job descriptions as the be all and end all of how we hire. The reality, we need to hire based on skills, and we need to hire on skills that potentially don't even exist. And that's where we need to be much more predictive. We need to be more thoughtful. And if we're not taking that analysis, we may be saving on our bottom line today. But as I say, in 3 years, we won't be saving our bottom line. We may be, as a company, irrelevant. I'm not saying NIT, I'm saying the company that's doing this work could be irrelevant in 3 years because they've not considered that. And look how many industries that have collapsed due to the lack of people or unable to support themselves. Look at air traffic controllers, look at the high wire and power electric companies. They don't have enough people that can actually do that work anymore. You're having flights being delayed, flights being cancelled because there's not sufficient people to do those jobs. And if you look that back just in air traffic control, that issue was created in the 1980s. And still not addressed all of this time. So I think we have to be much more predictive. And obviously that technology didn't exist in the 80s. It exists today. And I think we have to use technology to plan our workforce to the future.
I think what's really interesting is that a lot of companies know that they have a skills gap, but they don't know the details of that. And then what you're talking about is not even looking at that. It's actually looking to the future and saying, okay, well, what's the gap today? If you don't know that's the fundamental, but actually to be around in a few years or to be competitive, you need to know what's coming down the line. Are you seeing any examples globally of companies that are nailing it, that are doing this really, really well?
There are some companies that are using skills technology and using analytics products like Vizier as well. And, that is helping them predict. And I think the early adopters of skills have already had the benefits of that. Seeing that a lot in the kind of engineering space as well. So people where they've not been able to get those jobs filled and looking to other parts of the market to got similar skills and bringing those people in and, going to job fairs and bringing those in. Because it's not just about, how you identify the gap. How do you address that gap? And I think HR and recruitment have a massive play to play in that role, to not just find what's missing working with the business, but then actually to address that through their hiring processes. It's a whole ecosystem that needs to change. Even just for us acquiring clients, that whole process has changed. So we have to be much more forward looking where we are today. And those companies that are doing that today, they're the ones that are going to be successful in the future and also being successful today, to be fair to them. But I think they're the ones that are truly taking the lead.
Mike, one of the things that we've seen again and again is companies are moving away from this purchase of just lots of unlimited learning courses, like buying licenses and just handing that over to the staff, because when they've actually analyzed the completion rates, they're very, very low. And I think you mentioned earlier on, it's just like the personalized, customized journeys for workforce. So what is this moving trend? And is that across all sectors that you're seeing this?
It's interesting. I think to many extents, and this sounds a bit crazy when you say it out loud, content has been a bit of a blight on our industry. Because what other sector would you work in where you get completion rates of 25, 30% and you think that's acceptable? And I think one of the reasons for that is that the content has been pretty poor. One of our colleagues, he's our chief learning scientist, Greg Collins, uses this phrase that the course was always a compromise. Because whether you're delivering a course to 10 people or 10,000 people, they're always going to have different learning needs. And I think this sort of click next till you get to an assessment at the end and you've got to get 80% and you do it once a year, then you forget about it. That's always been a challenge for the industry. And I think that's what's so exciting about our sector right now, that we've really got an opportunity to move the needle on that. And I mentioned earlier when we talked about this personalized and immersive learning. So this concept of, some people are calling it a coach, some people are calling it a personal tutor, where this technology will know you, it will know your role, it will know the skills you need for the role, it will know the skills that you currently have, and it will adapt and it will deliver content that is immersive. And I mean, that is hugely exciting for us as an industry. And the tech is there now. I think the challenge that we've got is we refer to this element called the piping. So it's around governance, it's around organizations being ready to invest and move ahead with this. But the tech is there and it's ready to go, and it's very exciting.
I think it is really exciting because when you think about traditional learning, you're relying on the employee to work out their own skills gap and then which courses they should take. And something that I'm very passionate about, as you know, with Skill Suite, is if we can encourage reskilling and upskilling, but reward through talent mobility. I think a lot of people are on a certain career path, and whether it's mid-career or they've realized with AI they could transfer their skills to a different department. Traditionally, companies struggle to facilitate that on a skills first basis, where there's not a lot of bias in the process. Are you seeing that happening, that L&D and recruitment and talent mobility are starting to come together? And the big question I have is this common skills language, because if you don't have a common skills language across a business, you're nearly having a mismatch on learning and connecting talent with opportunity. What are you seeing on that front?
I think we are starting to see progress there. I think there's been a little bit of a residual headache. I mean, this was on the minds of companies. I mean, we've been talking to people, especially in my previous role where I was with a large global learning management system provider, about skills and how to manage the talent experience internally within an organization for a number of years now. The challenge was, historically, this was such a heavy lift to get off the ground. You had so many big systems that you had to integrate. You were looking at skills ontologies, you were looking at how you map those to courses. And there was a lot of investments that didn't even get going, let alone sort of start to prove return on investment. I think this is why I think we're now at the point where organizations are ready to look at this properly again and move forward. Gen AI is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting that just organizations didn't have the resources for previously. So we are starting to see organizations, and we're starting to see organizations, I think, review what that tech stack looks like. And this is why we're so excited about our partnership with your organization as well, Vanessa, because I think there's an opportunity to start moving the needle quite quickly. I don't know if you've got anything else you'd add there, Dylan.
Yeah, so I worked in this space a long time, 18 years building content and launching content, looking after engagement. So where I worked previously, we didn't have 20% completion rate. We had like 99% completion rate and engagement in the 90s. So, but that was by hard work. The technology didn't exist to do that. We had to create those learner pathways. We had to have adaptive learning. We had to make sure the learning that you needed to take as someone in operations versus finance versus legal was there, and really be learner centric. Now you can be learner centric. You can deliver all of these great things, engagement and so on, with the technology that now exists, which makes it a lot easier. As you said, we can use AI to support this. We can use skills technology, and all these things really make a true difference. But you still need the experts to help you to use that technology. And I think that's where NIIT comes in quite well, taking the technology like yourselves and actually adapting that as needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And another question I have is around early talent. We touched on it very, very briefly that AI is replacing early talent. In some countries now, unemployment for early talent has trebled in the last 12 months. Whose responsibility is it?
That's a big question. Yeah, it's a huge challenge, and I think it's something that needs to be looked at from at a governmental level in terms of preparing people for the modern workforce. And I think there's also a responsibility for business as well. We need to be looking at what we're doing in terms of providing opportunities for the workforce moving forward.
Yeah.
I think the key thing is L&D has to take the technology that exists. And I think there's, a lot of fear in some cases about technology, be it AI technology, be it skills technology, and really how do you bring all that together? I think also part of the problem is who owns the decision power, because L&D might want to use the technology, but it might be the CTO that decides what technology is picked. And sometimes those decisions are made on cost, not necessarily on the outcome. And I think what we have to be is much more focused on having the CTO, the head of L&D, and the business all working in a unified front, all with the same goal, which is to have the best skilled professionals for the future. And I think, as I said, companies that are going to be the best that unify those three things, that make you look like it's a one team decision. And also then bringing the experts as well, like NIIT, like technology, like yourself, truly have walked in their shoes, understand what needs to be done, but bringing the best technology to the fore to ensure that we can work together for a brighter future.
So if you're a head of L&D listening today and you're like, yes, to everything that we've said so far, and I want to get the buy-in, I need to get C-suite buying in, I need to get the CTO buying in. Is there any advice or recommendations that you would give them as to what's the first step they should take in order to get that buy-in?
I think a key thing is look at the technology stack they're using today. You go into some institutions that have multiple LMSs and multiple redundancies and so on. Let's first create a digital roadmap of what technology they should have. Then identify a bit like skills gap, like your technology, identify what's missing in their technology stack, which largely what we're seeing at the moment is the skills technology. Bringing that skills technology in as well, and then doing a small pilot. I think a cost-effective pilot that can be introduced that allows you to get, a simple report for one business unit truly allows you to then take that forward. You've now got something that proves the value of the skills technology, how easy it was to implement and how easy it was to get the results and do a course correction for the future. That can be very low cost, that can be done very quickly, but I think the benefits will be getting returns for years into the future.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I'm feeling really optimistic. So I've been selling into this sector for 20 plus years, and at times in the past it's been a slog because what we were delivering was seen as a nice to have rather than need to have. And I just think with the rate of transformation that organizations are going through at the moment, your people development, your skills strategy is going to be a core component of that. And I mean, you mentioned this earlier when you framed this question. It's developing those relationships internally and making sure that there's a common consensus about what the organization needs to do to move forward together. I think sort of from a first-hand experience, we've not always been speaking to heads of procurement, heads of people and heads of technology. It's either been one or two, but never all three together for what can be quite large investments. So, have a clear idea about what the future looks like, what your organization needs to do to support that, and then have some joined up conversations internally. And I think, as Dylan mentioned, there is some incredible tech that's coming out at the moment across skills and learning. And you also need to be educating yourself on what's available because the world is changing quickly. There is some pretty cool stuff coming out now.
I think the idea of doing a report, and we do have a skills AI report that can be done for businesses, but a light touch, fast impact report that you can bring to C-suite and have that conversation is really, really key. In terms of organizations now that have started the journey, and you mentioned, Mike, a little bit about a lot of them have experienced maybe heavy integrations. GenAI is completely changing it. Like if I look at our technology and the plugin, you don't need to do any heavy integrations anymore and trying to get skills ontologies to connect. So do you think companies are actually aware of that things can be rolled out much quicker? We're talking maybe 6 to 10 weeks rather than 6 to 10 months. Are they aware of how that speed has changed with AI?
I think it probably varies. I wouldn't want to sort of answer that question with a broad brush, but it definitely varies because there's always human nature, we focus on the bright, shiny things. I mean, I was the one talking about content and how excited I am. Some of the most exciting stuff is, like you said, the lifting that can be done by Gen AI and I remember the skills ontologies was always a huge piece, and it was always an Excel-based piece of work that was just so resource heavy. And now we can get that done in minutes or hours. And NIIT, I mean, we're part of this transition as well. I mean, or transformation. We are traditionally have been a headcount-based services organization. We are definitely looking at what we can do from a content perspective, but also we're looking at how we can optimize some of that service delivery on the back end as well. So, yeah, I think there's probably varying degrees of awareness in terms of how much has changed and how easier these programs are to get off the ground nowadays.
Listeners that we have are from all over the world. So is your professional service coverage and consultancy coverage anywhere in the world?
Well, we're a global company. I'm calling from today from Canada myself. So we work 24/7 across the globe, and I've led very long days starting, in the Middle East and usually ending in Australia. So yeah, we have that full support model, and we work with all the large clients across the world, including some small clients as well. So we're fully able to support as needed for our clients' needs.
I have a closing tradition for the podcast where I ask two questions, but you only have to answer one. And this is more for the listeners that maybe they're mid-career and they've been let go or made redundant, or they're starting out, they're early talent and they're really trying to get their foot on the ladder. The first question is there a skill that you have from when you were younger that you don't use anymore? And if so, why? Or the second question is for the people that are currently looking for opportunities at any age, what skill do you think is the most important to have in order to increase your chances of success in the coming year?
It's an interesting one. What skill I don't use anymore? I guess pen and paper, maybe. I don't know. When I started, computers were just coming in. So, I think the key thing is be a continuous learner. I think the one thing I've learned is I have to still go to conferences. I have to still, listen to podcasts and listen to other experts and how they're moving things. And it's a continuous learning journey. So just coming out of university, if you're one of those graduates who hasn't found a job yet, just take any opportunity. I think just to get on the ladder, to learn experience. And that's what people are looking for, that you're willing to try different things. I've worked for very diverse companies, and each time I found something I've learned from that and used that in my next role. Be like me and be like Mike, be a continuous learner, continue to learn and use that and roll that back in and use those examples when you're interviewing as well. Interviewers want to see that you've, gone and done things. And I think that's the most important thing. Keep being cute. And also, if you are interviewing, ask questions. Be inquisitive. So many people we interview today don't ask questions, are not inquisitive. Challenge even the interviewer in some ways. Well, why are you doing that? Could you do it a better way? Ask those questions that really make the interviewer think, because that's the kind of thing I think we're looking for as candidates today. It's someone who's really inquisitive, wants to learn and wants to give back. And I think if you can achieve those things, you'll be successful in life.
And I think great answer, Dylan. How do I follow that? I think I think it's quite easy to get siloed early in your career. And I think probably one thing that I always try to do, and sometimes you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone, is networking and really create connections across the industry that you work in. And that is a skill on its own, because it's not the easiest place to walk into a room sometimes and start talking to people you don't know. But especially early on in my career, I think that really helped me to move forwards probably quicker than I would have done. So, don't be afraid to get out there, network and put yourself out of your comfort zone sometimes. It's not always easy, but you'll reap the benefits in the mid to long term, definitely.
And on that point, Mike, I found, when I was working in a corporate, that offering to help someone else with something else that wasn't your responsibility, one created, that connection for you, because you were doing something not for your own benefit. You were in a way because you were learning something new, but it didn't come across that way, that you were being very open to support, very open to helping someone out. And usually you find that got paid back at some point in your career. So I think, just being willing to be out there, try something new. And obviously when you fall over, pick yourself up and do it again. It's a continuous journey, just like being in the playground. You got to keep learning. And that's why I love working in the learning space, because it's a continuous learning journey for me, working with others, helping them learn, and working with so many great clients as well to ensure that we can give the best of what our knowledge is and learn from them as well, of course. Because as I say, all the awards we've won at NIIT, we've won those awards with our clients. They're not our awards, they're our clients' awards, really. And I think having that kind of philosophy as a company that ensures we're continuing to push the boundaries. I like working at that kind of position where we are, really pushing the boundaries of education, learning, and really making the difference, especially in my space, in the technology space, and how we utilize that within businesses. Who wouldn't want to work in that space? It's exciting, it's interesting, and it's rewarding at the end of the day. And I think we are very lucky, as Mike said, to work in the space, especially at this time in our careers, because it is a very exciting time to be in.
Yeah, and to really make a difference. I know that NIIT and Abodoo are so aligned in terms of our values. We really believe this. Everyone should have access to learning and working, and ultimately have a home. It's the meaning of the company name, and you are right. It's a very rewarding industry, because when we get things right, whether it's predicting skills, closing L&D gaps, it means people remain employed, they get promoted, they're happier in what they do. And so I'm very excited about what we're going to do together. And anyone listening today, if you want to learn more, we'll have links to the businesses below. And if you heard anything today, whether it was the report or predicting skills or anything, feel free to get in touch and we'll see if we can help you. But just Dylan and Mike, thank you so much for coming on the Global Skills Podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thanks.
Whether you're leading a business, shaping education, planning your next career move, or just starting out, you're part of a global conversation about how we learn, work, and grow. If you've enjoyed this episode, tap subscribe so you never miss the latest insights. And if you've a moment, leaving a quick rating really helps people find the show. For early access to new episodes, event invitations, and the chance to connect with others driving real change, join the community at globalskillspodcast.com. The future of skills belongs to all of us. Proudly sponsored by Abodoo, empowering organisations and educators with world-class skills technology to build a better future for everyone.